This is an essential reprogramming device, and your life will definitely be better off as you discard the garbage that's in the way. Whatever the focus of my attention now determines the quality of my experience now. The course and physics and everything else will tell us that once words and deeds are spoken or acted out, they fall off the radar screen. They cease to exist.
Hello, everyone. My guest today is Carol Howe. Carol was involved with bringing A Course in Miracles to the public. She was a close personal friend of co-scribe Bill Thetford. So Carol has been around since the beginning. I'm so honored to be speaking with you today. Thank you for agreeing to do this.
Oh, you're very welcome. There's just nothing more fun. People say, don't you get tired of saying the same thing over and over again? It's like, no.
Well, I am glad that you don't, because you just have such a gift with teaching the course and putting these things into a way that's easy to understand. From your unique perspective, what is A Course in Miracles and what is its purpose and its main message that it's communicating to us?
Well, its main message is the whole teaching of non-duality. In other words, that there's really only oneness, so to speak. And as far as I'm concerned, and having read a lot of stuff and so on over the years, I personally consider it, just my personal opinion, in terms of its value, it's probably the most important work that's come to us in the past 2,000 years. In terms of leading us to, you might say, an inward place, not just so we know a lot of facts, but because we can experience more and more the sense of joy and safety of our oneness, so to speak. That's not anything you can intellectually learn, but you can by following the principles that it advocates. And one of the main ways that it does this is through the healing of our relationships. The whole relationship issue has to be revisited. And by this time, it seems like I've talked to about 1 million people. I'm sure that's true, but it certainly seems like it. And every single person, every one of us on the planet have some completely false ideas about our relationships with other people. And those, they're not evil ideas. They're simply incorrect ideas. In other words, they would be like if I lived in Florida for a long time before I moved back to Denver. And if I decided, I think I want to go to New York, and I was given instructions about how to get to Oregon, I mean, it's like there's nothing evil about instructions to Oregon, except I'm never going to get to New York.
Right.
So it's kind of like there's no evil intent. It's just lack of awareness about what really works. And relationships become the crucible of our learning, because our relationships are going to show us in explicit detail what we blame ourselves for, what we hold against ourselves, what we feel guilty about. And you might say, oh, well, that doesn't sound like much fun. Well, it hasn't anything to do with having fun or not. It has to do that to the extent that we feel guilty, we can be guaranteed of punishment. Guilt is like being on your knees, praying to be punished in some way, and you will be. And of course, the big three are through health, finances, relationships. Something will go wrong, so to speak, with those. So relationships will show us in mirror form what it is we think about ourselves, what we blame ourselves for, because we project that on to the people who are, we shall call them our learning partners, so to speak. So sorting all of that out becomes what the course is for. And because sometimes our Sunday school learning, so to speak, of what forgiveness is confuses us greatly and almost makes our situation worse because we've been taught, most people I run into anyway, have been taught that forgiveness is pardoning someone else for the hurt that they gave us, so to speak. In other words, they're the villains, I'm the victim, and somehow I have to be okay with that. Well, that is an impossible task. Nobody can legitimately actually be perfectly okay with being mistreated by somebody else and somebody else gets off scot-free or whatever.
Right.
So the reorienting ourselves about what the word, because the word forgiveness, as you know, appears over and over and over again. Like, this is our way home. Well, if we don't understand our way home, this is a big problem. So once we reorient to the idea that what the word forgiveness means in this context is I'm releasing my own guilt. In other words, that forgiveness is my release of what I'm hanging on to. And the other person is going to be showing me in great detail what that is. And so when people, make appointments and they say, my mother-in-law or my brother or my kids or my next door neighbor or my boss, and they're so like this, then my job, which I do practically daily, is lead them to discover that what they're seeing in someone else is what they really fear about themselves, what they really feel guilty about. And sometimes, and this is really important, we may know some of the things that we may feel guilty about, but there are things in our unconscious mind that we carry with us from our very earliest days before you have a functioning left brain, which is the thinking brain. When that's not functioning yet, I'm already establishing kind of organically a sense of myself, and much of it is incorrect. And from out of that, I begin to believe as truths about myself, things that aren't true at all, but they got, you might say, wired in those earliest years when I had no ability to see the big picture of what was going on. And a lot of that is kind of unknown to us, but along comes somebody that's aggravating or you can't stand, and they're helping you often to that unconscious guilt. And it doesn't matter if it's conscious or unconscious, it's doing its damage as long as you hang on to it. So the course is about freeing us. It's not about just learning a bunch more facts to regurgitate on a test someplace. And it's not about only how do I negotiate my way in a world where people are hateful or unpleasant or whatever. It's about how I can have an entirely different kind of world to live in as I keep discovering and releasing things that I'm holding on to. So the key is to turn what I think is a truth about me that I need to keep hidden to a belief about me that I need to discard. Can you see there's an enormous difference? There's a life-changing difference in the two. And of course, the course is very clear saying, and by the way, everybody, you can't heal yourself by yourself for the simple reason that you need other people to help you delve into what you need to release yourself. So it's an amazing psychological work as well as a spiritual work, which is why I refer to it as like a psycho-spiritual work, because it does all of these things. And it says, now the way you can heal this is to, now that you can recognize that there is an a connection between the people in your life and you. And it says you can't heal yourself alone. You can't go sit in a bedroom someplace and say, I'm a good person. I'm a good person. I'm just fine. I'm not guilty. End of story. It's like, no, that's not getting to the emotional heart of the matter. That's just kind of a little beginning intellectual exercise. But I have to completely shift. In some cases, it's just fine tuning for some people. And for others, it's a complete shift. It says, when I'm healed, I'm not healed alone. And whatever it is that I want for someone else is what I will experience. In other words, so that if I want and can adopt the plan, so to speak, of everybody I interact with, whether it's family members, to the grocery store clerk, to people you pass on the street, when there is a genuine desire, and it's one that we cultivate and practice, of wanting them to experience their goodness, their innocence, their right to be here, where your sense of them is to be supportive of them, remembering that what's in my mind as that gift to someone else. In other words, wanting to see what's best about them, regardless of any of their actions. The actions are gone the moment the words and deeds disappear the minute they're over with, because the past is not stored anywhere. So it's like, if I can convey in this moment with whoever I'm with that they're perfectly fine, they're good, they're innocent, I'm perfectly safe in their company, then because those thoughts are in my mind, they not only accrue to this person, they accrue to me as a gift as well. So the extent to which I wish others well, want them to have the best possible life, I am guaranteeing my own, because what's in my mind determines the quality of my life. Don't you think that's pretty simple?
Yeah, so simple. Carol, I'd love to get more into your personal journey with the Course, but first I want to dive into something that you said there, where you were pointing out that forgiveness is actually releasing our own guilt. So just so that we can practically understand this for my listeners and myself as well, maybe let's use an example that's, I think, pretty common for people. So let's say that somebody is a people pleaser and has been bending over backwards to serve everybody in their life, and over the years, that's not been reciprocated to them, and so they're starting to build up resentment towards the people in their life. What would that be reflecting back to them about themselves that they need to let go of?
Well, there are several things to say about that. Number one, being a people pleaser. And I grew up in an era a long time ago when that was absolutely required. Children were to be seen and not heard, and don't bother anybody, and don't ask for anything, and don't say no. Just be like a nice, polite little mannequin.
Right.
So being a people pleaser is a defense. It's part of the way I try to stay safe in the environment. Because if I'm a people pleaser as an adult, this says when I was young, if I behaved in a certain way that didn't please the folks in the environment that I was in, I got punished. Well, even a little small person can figure out intuitively, well, if when I say no or ask for what I want or really speak my mind openly and I get punished for it, I just learn to not do that. In other words, this is preservation. Now, this is intuitive on the part of us at a very young age. It's not like we think through this logically, which is how it gets so ingrained, and it's brought forward as an adult. And nowhere along the line does it occur to us to go, I wonder if I really need these defenses. In other words, it doesn't occur to us that it's a defense. It's just, this is how you're supposed to be. Now, what would normally happen when somebody says, I'm being so taken advantage of or mistreated or whatever, I ask people to say, okay, just give me 2 adjectives and just say, what I can't stand about this person is that they're so, just give me 2 words. So people will give me 2 words. And I'll say, okay, have you ever in your whole life been in a situation where these 2 words could apply to your behavior? And 100% of the people who are being honest, which is basically everybody, says yes. So it's like, oh, all right. Well, our mirroring activity is beginning at once. And then I go through a process, which it might take too much time to do it right now, to help them see so they can condemn it, a certain behavior, doesn't matter what the behavior is, in someone else, but they can sort of make an excuse for it on their part.
Right.
It's like, well, and I help people see, and I feel like this is important, that, okay, so at some point, possibly, you were the person who was being, fill in the blank, whatever kind of behavior. And I will tell you just sort of this next step I would take is, okay, think of a time when this described your behavior. Just, I don't want to know what it is. I don't want to know anything about it or when. I just want that incident to come into your awareness. And so here begins to be a really important question. And that is, okay, not from today's perspective, but back then, under those circumstances, with your knowing what you knew and not knowing what you didn't know, and so on, do you feel that you had any other choice? Not from today's perspective, where you could look back and go, well, yeah, of course I had another choice. But at the moment when that behavior was being exhibited, and 100% of people, when they're led properly in this, will say, no, this is all I could do at the moment.
Right.
So once we can begin to see both myself and anybody else are doing, because of whatever's being triggered and whatever is happening, that we're all doing the highest and best that we're able to do, even if you're an axe murderer at that moment, with whatever is the horrible fear that's coming up for you and so on, it's the highest and best you can do. I'm not condoning axe murdering. I'm just saying that it doesn't matter whether it's a minor or a major one. Everybody is trying to stay safe. Now, it may not be physically trying to stay safe, but psychologically trying to stay safe. Because if a situation is bringing up our own pain or our own guilt or our own distress in some way, then it's the survival instinct, so to speak, that is being triggered. And then there's other steps. In fact, I'm about to write a book and put all of these steps in it. I have to get that done soon. But you can see that if you would reorient looking at behavior as a person's call for help, rather than just being a jerk and doing whatever they're doing to try to hurt her, if that can be reframed, can you see the difference that would make? The Course is very clear about this, that any sort of unloving behavior is a call for help. And so now we've got the option to, push them over and stomp on them and say, no, I'm not interested in your welfare at all. Mm. Or I can see this as seeing something as a call for help doesn't mean you condone it and think it's a good idea and want it to continue. It allows you to kind of walk in their shoes, so to speak. And it allows a kind of merciful understanding to occur. And when we approach people with, you might say, a merciful point of view, with a kind of understanding about this, this is contagious. And shall we say, the communications experts of the world, and I find this absolutely fascinating from the day I first found out about it until today, is that when we're interacting with somebody, that whether it's a problem person or not a problem person, with just anybody, so the experts in this field will tell us that about a very small percentage, maybe 7% of what we're conveying to somebody is verbal. And then about 22 or 3% is the nonverbal. It's facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, etc. And about a full 70% of what we convey to somebody else is in our energy field. You can't hide that. You can't manipulate it, because it's a true barometer, so to speak, of where our intentions are. If we want to be helpful to other people, if we want to understand things, or if we want to back off from them and hold them as the enemy, so to speak, all of that stuff is conveyed whether we like it or not. So we might be able to manage the other things a little bit. You can't manage what's in your energy field. You can only keep changing it for the better, which is, I think, fascinating information, and kind of helps to make clear why, if we want to be healed and if we want to be helpful, our intention, whether we ever say a word about it or not, needs to be, I'm here for you. I understand you. I want to see that underlying your behavior is your eternal innocence, the innocence of your presence that is not part of this war. In other words, it's never damaged. It's never altered. It's never contaminated. It's never defiled. Your presence is always loving and good, period, end of story. It's what's going on at the mind level and the action level that can be terrible.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I love that explanation. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I love how you made the differentiation that when we see a behavior as a call for help, then we can have a merciful compassion towards that person without necessarily condoning what they're doing.
Exactly. In other words, when somebody is hateful to somebody else, you just realize, okay, now when I'm feeling loved and cared for and noticed, am I inclined to go out and punch somebody in the nose? It's like, no, I want to be there. I want to be helpful to people. I want to sort of spread the fact that life is good with people. So it's like, and the thing that helps make this reasonable to us is everybody talks about all this stuff that happened to me when I was growing up and all this stuff that happened yesterday and so on and so forth, as if my experience today was a function of what happened back then. Nothing could be further from the truth, because the Course and physics and everything else will tell us that once words and deeds are spoken or acted out, they aren't stored someplace like a great big giant pile of events and words. They fall off the radar screen. They cease to exist. So we have all learned the unfortunate notion that cause and effect is horizontal, that I'm experiencing now because of stuff back then. It's like, nope, cause and effect is vertical. Whatever the focus of my attention now determines the quality of my experience now. So I don't have to undo anything. I don't have to try to make something go away because there's not anything there to make go away. In other words, it's like, oh, okay, well then if my experience now has nothing to do with my past or future and has to do with the contents of my mind and what I believe right now, this makes this a much simpler chore. I need to look and see, where am I holding grievances? Where do I believe things that aren't true? Where do I wish somebody ill? Like the things that are unloving notions in my mind right now are the culprit. Well, then if I have any sense whatsoever, I'm going to upgrade them, so to speak. I'm going to change my mind about how I'm going to view this moment and the people in it. Which is, you see, if in fact it were true that I'm impoverished now because of what happened back here, I might as well just go jump off a cliff. I mean, I'm doomed if I'm constantly at the mercy of a whole bunch of stuff back here that there's not anything I can do anything about. Happily, that's a big lie, because if my experience now is a function of where my attention goes now, then put your attention in a place that's going to be helpful and healing and satisfactory and everything else. And of course, we know there's not a future, that we need to know as certainly there's not a past. That's the part that we have to undo. So that what I have to do now is like, okay, if cause and effect is in this moment, now to make this even simpler, in this moment, I only have two choices about where my attention goes. See how much easier this gets? There's no past and no future I have to do anything about. And in the moment I'm in, I only have two choices about where to put my attention, not 457. I'm either doing and being involved in the care and maintenance of my ego self. Am I okay? What do I have to get? What do I have to make go away? How do I have to impress people? All of that kind of stuff. Primarily, to reduce it to a few words, what kind of a little fortress do I have to live in order to be safe and to somehow get what I need to live comfortably? Or, see, and that's all strictly at the time and space. It's all about me as a person level. On the other hand, and by the way, all of those decisions would have to be based on an imaginary that's not even here past, because I have no way of knowing what a future is. However, my intuition does. So in this moment, I either can be engaged in kind of living in my little fortress and being involved with the care and maintenance of my little sense of ego self, or I can learn to follow my intuition, follow the Holy Spirit, if you're going to use coarse language, because that functionality in my mind, so to speak, has the entire universe, if you want to think of it, to operate from. In other words, I can't know what's going to happen in the future, but there's something about my guidance. I mean, my ego mind doesn't, but my guidance does. And so if you get the sense in this moment, because you're only living one moment at a time, so if you get the sense, I need to call this person. You may not have any idea why, but if that thought comes into your mind and it kind of feels like a yes, do it. Or if you've planned to do something and you go, that doesn't feel right. That feels kind of flat. There's not energy to it. Even though it seems like it might be a good thing to do, when you learn to follow either the energetic uplift or a kind of flatness as you consider what you're doing, where you're going, what plans you're making, then with beyond the shadow of a doubt, you're moving in that loving direction. You're moving in that direction where you're safer and things work out more abundantly, and you meet just who you need to meet, and you are where you need to be. Your ego mind has no ability to make those plans because it has no access to, shall we say, guidance for like what's around the corner. but your intuition does. So it would be crazy to rely on your intellectual mind, which we're taught to do, and to ignore your intuition. Like, for instance, have you ever been in a situation where you had a kind of an intuitive sense to do something and you didn't do it? And then later on, were very sorry you didn't do it. Has that ever happened?
Yes.
And kind of in the reverse, where you just got like, you know what? If I look on the internet for this thing that I can't find anyplace else, like, I wonder if that's where it is. And sure enough, that's where it'll be. I've just been through a batch of that stuff myself as I've moved into my new quarters here. I was looking for, I'm on the second floor. The patio faces the west, and that's where the rain and the wind and so on so often comes from. And I brought some antique wicker furniture that belonged to my grandparents. So it's probably 130 or 40 years old, and it can't get wet. So where I had it in Florida was on a screened-in porch, but it was arranged so that it didn't get wet there. So I thought, well, I've got to find some shades or something, that I can pull down from the ceiling to the floor and protect the furniture. Well, I just got nowhere with the shades. They were either impossible, the wrong dimensions, cost $2,000. It was ridiculous. And so all of a sudden, in comes this thought. This is the way I live my life, by what the thoughts are that come in that said, I wonder if there's such a thing as a wet, waterproof drape. I had never heard of such a thing, thought of such a thing. I've never seen it or heard anybody talk about it. So I look it up on the internet, and sure enough, exactly what I was looking for was there. And what's more, the exact perfect color was the first one that showed.
Wow.
Not just almost, a perfect match to other stuff I've got. And so it's like, if you're not used to following your intuition, then start today, because your intuition can guide you on mundane things like how to keep the furniture from being rained on, or very major things. I followed my intuition to come back out here to Denver. If somebody had asked me a few months before I got this message that I would move back to Denver, I would go, why? Why would I do such a thing as that? I love where I am in Florida. I have wonderful friends. Life is good. Why? And then all of a sudden, things began to shift around, and it was very clear that I needed to move back here. All the reasons I won't belabor you with, but the point is that it was not an intellectual decision to move back. It was a guided decision. And all I can tell anybody is part of what this course is about is to reassure you that your guidance, or you can call it the direction of the Holy Spirit, all of which is the same thing, is trustworthy. And this is kind of establishing that connection, so to speak, with your own wisdom and your own loving nature and your own goodness, rather than believing things that inevitably got wired in before we had an ability to say yes or no to what was being wired in. So it's like a reprogramming device, if you want to think of it that way. And if you don't understand some of what drives you, you might not realize how desperately we need a reprogramming device, because we believe things. And the two words that I hear most often from people who, when I ask them, what their ego mind tells them about themselves, the two most prevalent words are being unworthy, being undeserving. And that's the kind of stuff that when you're an infant in the environment in which we find ourselves, even if you have the world's best parents with no functioning left brain, you've only got a right brain, you are inevitably going to wire in notions that are incorrect. And this is a way of discovering what they are and discarding them in a major way, affecting the quality of our lives. And we cannot blame stuff out here for the quality of our lives, because the things that we believe are literally constructing the nature of what's out here, so to speak, our outer environment. It tells us your three-dimensional world is a mirror. It is an exact to the last detail mirror of the thought processes in your own mind. And so if you've got thought processes in your own mind that you don't even know are there, and yet they're just as powerful as the ones that you're aware of, this is not good. I need to know what they are. And the people come along in our lives that we think are the villains or the bad guys or the whatever. No, they aren't. They're your liberators, because they're going to help you see what's wired in that you believe about yourself and your worth and what you're like and what you can have and what you can't have. And once that's brought into your conscious mind, then as hopefully a wiser adult, you can make much better choices, and you can let go of the infantile things that we believe about ourselves that are undermining our peace, our happiness, our prosperity, our safety. So this is not trivial. This is crucially important, life-saving, often literally, material to let it lead us to a much more loving and amazing assessment of ourselves and truly wanting to be helped. Bill's little prayer, I'm here only to be truly helpful. And I don't have to worry about what to say or what to do, because he brought me will, in other words, that's the only part of the course that did not get delivered in the normal way. It was that little 6 lines or so was inserted. And because they thought it was so helpful, and because of the circumstances under which it arrived, they were just going to insert it in this very early on, as you know, in the text. So this is a retraining program. It's a reprogramming program. In my early working days, after I taught school for 3.5 years, I worked for IBM as a systems engineer. Way back a long time ago, when nobody really knew what computers were. When you went to work for IBM, you had no idea there were punch card machines. I mean, this is the fact. I went to work for IBM here in Denver 60 years ago next month. Now, there was nothing known about computers 60 years ago, except at IBM and control data. So they had to train everybody and so on. But and if you debug programs, which I did a great deal of, where people are getting a result on their computers, outprint something is like, this isn't right. Something's gone wrong. Then, especially back in the very primitive early days, so you would print out the code of the program. And people like me, among other things, decoded to see where is the logic incorrect, because the incorrect logic internally in the computer is causing incorrect effects out here being printed out, being put on a tape drive or whatever it is. So you can't fix it after it's printed out on a printer level. You've got to back up here and you've got to correct the logic wherever it was just a misunderstanding on the part of whoever was writing the code, going from beginning to end, so to speak. So this is very much the same way. It's finding the coding that's incorrect. So it's not anything the matter with us. There was not anything the matter with the computer itself. There was a problem with the program. So we have a problem with our internal program, not with us, which makes all the difference in the world. Because we need to get over the idea there's something the matter with us. There's just something the matter with what we believe, our programming.
I love that.
Non-personal that way. I went in one time to an account up in Boulder. It was a very big company and they had a very big programming department. And I went in and the guy was like, "Oh, we're so glad to see you. We have all been in here all night long trying to find, and just surely it's got to be the hardware because we can't find it anywhere." And so I said, "All right, let me see the code." So I went, there it is. There's the problem. And they go, "How can you do that? It took you 20 minutes and we've all been here all night long." It's because I'm not invested in being right. And you are. You're sure that your programming is right. I'm not invested. I just want to find the error. So I was looking at it from different eyes than they were. And this allows us to do the same thing. We can look at our own coding, so to speak, or our own belief structures through loving eyes instead of critical ones. And that allows us to see the big picture more easily, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. We're coming up to our time here, but I would like to briefly hear about your personal journey with A Course in Miracles and the role that you played in bringing it forward, because you were part of the original group.
Well, I, right from the beginning, started teaching classes. In other words, because here in Denver or any place else, nobody knew anything about this. And we had established, several of us got together, half a dozen of us, and established an attitudinal healing center here that was based on Jerry Jampolsky's in California. And Bill sat on our board of directors. And I had said, okay, we're going to do training for people who are interested in attitudinal healing, but I'm also, if anybody's interested, I'm going to teach some sort of class thing. So that happened. But prior to that, before we even established it, the word started to get around a little bit here in Denver that I knew something about the course. So people would call me and say, can I talk to you? Or are you ever going to do a class? And I said, I have no idea, but I'll take your name. Well, somehow I got to about 20 or 25 names. And I thought, well, I'm going to bring this group of people to my house, which I did, and told them a little bit about it and said, are you all interested in having a class? And they said, yes, we are. And everybody except one person who had choir practice on the night when we were going to meet said, yes. This was like a Thursday night. I remember it because I thought, what have I just committed to? I said, okay, next Tuesday night, my husband was in the real estate business and he could get us an executive suite office downtown that we could meet in. I said, we will have, and I was just sort of inventing this as I went along, we'll have a 15-week class because I could not imagine how you could present this material in any less. Well,
Right.
now I can do it, but I couldn't then. I was a novice trying to teach it. I was not a novice teacher, but I was a novice at this. So I thought, what am I going to do? What have I just done? As they walked out the door, I've just committed to a 15-week class and it's going to begin in 5 days. What am I going to do? So the next morning I woke up and I thought, okay. And this was strictly a sense of guidance. It was like sort of all of a sudden, it was almost like a download of, okay, this would be the logical first thing to do. And so I did. And that night went to the class and that went well. The next morning, Wednesday morning, I did the same thing. I immediately got kind of a download of what needed to be in the second class that would be the next Tuesday night. And that continued on for the 15 weeks. And then I ultimately reduced it to a 6-week class because I realized most people are not going to be willing to be part of a 15-week class when they don't even yet know what it's about. So then I did a whole batch of 6-week classes and so on and so forth. So that's a very short answer to your question, since I know you don't have much time left. So I just did what needed to be done. And then that led to going everywhere teaching classes. I mean, it just sort of all mushroomed out.
Well, Carol, I'm so glad that you did that. And I'm so thankful for everything that you've put out into the world. Like I said, it's definitely had a positive impact on my life. So I'd like to give you a chance to share where the viewers can find you.
Well, we have a website. 'Cause I partnered with a young, brilliant filmmaker about a dozen years ago. And he called one day and said, would you be willing to film all those models that you've created? It took about 10 years to build these big teaching models with my former partner. And so we talked about it and said, okay. So we got together and at a huge amount of time and expense created our See How Life Works series and several other video series that are on the website, carolhowe.com. And also over the years, there's so much stuff on there, I don't even know what it is anymore. There's articles, there's podcasts, there's other short little video things, there are audio things, there are everything imaginable on our YouTube site, which I think you just go to YouTube and say Carol Howe, and there's a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And on our website where our programs are available. And I got the sense a couple of years ago about making an audio book of both Never Forget to Laugh, which is Bill Thetford's biography. And then to my astonishment, I kind of talk out loud to my intuition that said, make an audio book of the text. And I think I literally did talk to the space in my house. You've got to be kidding. And 22 pages long. Yeah. I have a lot of other things to do. Like, do you know how long this is going to take to record and do all of the proofing and all of the everything that has to be done for 622 pages? And it was like, record the text. So I did. And it's now available as an audio book. And both of those are on the website.
Okay, I'm going to have to get that one.
And I've made it very inexpensive. It's like $35 or something, which is a ridiculous price for something that's as long as it is.
Right.
And it took a year to do. But I think listening to it makes all the difference in the world. To my astonishment, as much as I have been immersed for 45 years in the course, I even found it more helpful to listen to. And it wasn't because it was my voice. It was the process of listening rather than reading. You use a different part of your brain when you listen rather than read. Mm-hmm. And I would highly recommend deciding to listen. You can listen at your own rate, listen however quickly or slowly you want to do it. But I was amazed myself at some of the depth of meaning that sort of jumped out at me. And I've probably read that text 150 times. It's not like I'm not incredibly familiar with it. But listening is a very different operation than reading. Mm-hmm. So I would recommend that for course people.
All right, Carol, thank you for everything. I will have your links in the description. I'll also link those daily course lesson videos in the description that you have on YouTube for people. So thank you so much for being willing to do this. Thank you for the work that you're doing. It's greatly appreciated.
You're very, very welcome. It's always lovely to help people know that this is an essential reprogramming device, and your life will definitely be better off as you kind of discard the garbage that's in the way of the things we believe about ourselves and how life actually works.
Thank you for watching the Love Covered Life podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and comment with your thoughts and opinions, and check the description box for the links to my free community where I share lots of resources, my Pay What You Can community where we do classes and challenges together, my TikTok, Instagram, my Clips channel, and lovecoveredlife.com where I share my paintings. Thank you so much for your support.